Today, on Florida Sportsman, Project Dreamboat. Wildfire Marine gets back to work on the 23-foot Seacraft restoration.
Corey sent me an email wanting to know if we could put a pair of 150s on the bracket instead of a 300. Called them back and told them no, the bracket was built specifically for 300. We'd have to order a twin-engine bracket.
Two Rivers Boatworks puts in overtime to complete the 36-foot Yellowfin.
I'm super excited about it. The reason being, I think it's because we've reached a milestone. You know, the end is really in sight now.
George Labonte joins Dreamboat owner Steve Atman aboard his dive-inspired 29-foot World Cat.
Today we met up with Steve and his family in Palm Beach, Florida to see just exactly what makes this World Cat their dream boat.
And L&H rigs and sea trials, the 36-foot Billy Knowles project.
We do want to have the flexibility that trim tabs will give the boat, and the Bennett trim tabs are a perfect fit for the boat.
All coming up on Florida Sportsman, Project Dreamboat. Join us as we follow one-off builds to all-out restorations in Stuart, Florida's Dreamboat District, home to some of the best custom boat builders in the world. From modest to over-the-top, industry experts from the district's premier facilities show how it's done. Fiberglass repair, custom paintwork, engine rigging, electronics installations, and more. And boating editor George Labonte shares the stories of boaters who have already turned their dreams into reality. This is Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat.
We'd started on this 23 Seacraft for Corey Fountain from Savannah. We gutted the boat completely. We put a new transom in it, got that installed, put our stringers in, our reinforcing brace for the bracket for a 300 Suzuki outboard. And we were building our floor panels to cover up the rest of the deck. And Corey sent me an email wanting to know if we could put a pair of 150s on the bracket instead of a 300. I called him back and told him no, the bracket was built specifically for 300. We'd have to order a twin-engine bracket. His reasoning was he wanted to go to joystick controls because of the currents where he lives up in Savannah. We kind of had to put that boat on hold. We went ahead and did the 25 Mako for Brian. And now we're getting back on the 23 again. Before we went ahead and did any of the floor panels, we put one big PVC pipe for a rigging tube. What we normally use is a sewer pipe, which is very lightweight. You can get in 3-inch or 4-inch diameter. We also put PVC pipe for fuel lines, because what ends up happening is you have fuel lines that drape down, and if you have a low spot in the fuel line, and if that ever leaks, it'll siphon the tank dry. And in doing the floor panel, it's completely sealed and basically built the same way they did in the mold at the factory, except we did it in pieces instead of one solid deck mold. And we went ahead and got our new fuel tank bed and fuel tank installed. When we install the fuel tank, we use PVC shims on either side of the tank where all the mounting tabs are. This allows the water to flow out through the limber holes in the back of the bulkhead, and it also allows air to circulate around the tank. And as long as that happens, you won't get any rot, so they should last quite a bit longer. On the front seating, Corey wanted to do a walkthrough all the way up to the anchor locker, which is something we hadn't done in a 23 before. For the two forward walls, we used a couple layers of mat and then a couple layers of biaxial glass, Divinacell coring, and another layer of biaxial, which is plenty strong for a small seating area. The only place we did use the wood was on the bulkhead side, and then we went ahead and glassed those together. After they set up, we grind our edges, and then we cut our biaxial glass to wrap around it. And sometimes the biaxial glass, being as stiff as it is, doesn't want to lay down really tight in the corner and you get a little pucker. So we found that if you use a good quality plastic wrap like Saran wrap or Glad wrap, you put that on there, and if you squeegee it out away from the joint, you'll force all the air out and it'll create its own vacuum. And basically it's the same as vacuum bagging on a real small scale, and it works for small parts. And by using a good quality Saran wrap like that, it peels right off. And then when we went ahead and did our little lip on the front of that, basically what I did is I cut a groove the thickness of the core. So I had a flat spot, the thickness of the core, and another flat spot. I did that out of a piece of 3/4 plywood on a table saw. And then we went ahead and covered that with aluminum duct tape, which works really good. We use that a lot in a lot of our molds because glass doesn't stick to that as well. So we put that in there, put that piece on and clamp it. And when you remove that, we had a nice sharp edge and a nice flat piece to work with, and it was nice and tight to the rest of the seating. Once that dried, we went ahead and did a coat of fairing. I sanded it out, did a second coat, and then after we sanded the perimeters and everything, I found out if we go ahead and we glass that edge nice and sharp, then we know it's perfectly straight. And then if we use that long board to round it off, it comes out nice. And then we do it by hand, you know, the last one with a soft hand just to get any scratches out. And then for the radius up against the floor and the wall panel and the seat and the gunnel side, I go ahead and I put some filler in with a stick first, and then I take a squeegee and basically squeeze it to however thickness radius I want and run it right down along the edge, and then just clean the excess off the edge. That fairing compound is too porous. If you were to shoot primer on it, you would be able to see it right away. There's a texture to it. It's not nice and smooth. So we go ahead and use this glazing, which fills all that in. And basically, when you sand it again, you take almost all the glazing back off, but it's filled everything. And when you feel it, it's baby smooth. And then you can go ahead and do your primer and paint from there.
When we come back, the team at Two Rivers Boatworks works to rig and reassemble the triple engines on the 36-foot Yellowfin project. This segment brought to you by Two Rivers Boatworks. Exceptional design, quality, and craftsmanship.
Dreaming of transforming your boat into the envy of the fleet? The experts at Two Rivers Boatworks are dedicated to customizing your boat to your specific needs and personality. Specializing in fiberglass and composites repair, professional painting, systems installation, and more. Founded by boating enthusiasts, we understand the enjoyment of being on the water, offering exceptional design, craftsmanship, and quality, so you can spend more time on the water than dreaming about it. Visit our facility in Stuart, Florida, and turn your boating dreams into reality.
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as the experts at Two Rivers Boatworks bolt on some serious power on the 36-foot Yellowfin project.
So over at Two Rivers Boatworks, we got this awesome 36 Yellowfin in that we've done an extensive amount of work on it. We've put new fuel tanks in, we've painted the bottom, we've put jack plates on the back of the boat. It was quite a lot of work. The guys worked really, really hard. Every single back end plate had to be custom made because we've moved the motors from 28 off center to 26 on center. And these boats weren't really designed for that. So the guys have got it all sorted out, and we're really, really looking forward to getting the motors hung and reassembling the motors with their fancy new cowlings. I can't wait to see what the paint jobs look like on them.
So now that the jack plate's on, we're gonna get the crew together, and all hands on deck, we're gonna wheel the 3 motors around to the engine bay where the gantry's at so we can hook them up and lift them up to the transom. After we got the motors wheeled around to the engine bay, we hooked them up and lifted them up to the back of the boat. We want to make sure we're using high-grade stainless steel for the bolts on these to make sure they've got high tensile strength. We don't want them a couple years down the road to start shearing off. People lose motors that way. Being that we've got this jack plate on there, we're gonna hang the motors at a new recommended height. The center motor needs to be hung a little bit lower, so on the outside motors, we hung those on holes 3 and 5, and the center motor, we mounted that on holes 1 and 3 to bring that down to the recommended height.
So the guys finally got the motors bolted onto the jack plates. I'm super excited about it. The reason being, I think it's because we've reached a milestone. You know, the end is really in sight now. And I saw Nate starting to bring over the cowling pieces, and I got really, really excited to see the final pieces of this puzzle coming together, and to see how our vision and things that have been in my mind for so long are actually playing out, and they're coming out better than I expected them to.
When I'm assembling the cowlings, I like to start from the bottom and work my way up. It just helps me know that I've got everything put together 100%. I'll start with the chaps, which are the 2 side pieces. I've heard them called the legs before, and then I'll go up and I'll put the 2 side pieces on. One of them, I call it the snorkel. I don't know what it's technically called, but that's where all the wiring and the hoses go into. And then the back piece, that has to go on next because that's attached by 2 clips inside. And then finally you can put the top piece on, and everything latches together and locks in tight when that piece goes on.
My crew have put the cowlings on, and I'm really, really impressed with how well they've come out. They're super clean. Nothing screams custom quite like those cowlings scream custom. So we're busy putting the whole boat back together. We're reinstalling the upholstery. Unfortunately, the owner has decided at this time not to redo the upholstery. We really gave it a good deep clean. My crew spent quite a bit of time making sure that they could bring out the best of what we were working with. So we've pretty much come to the end of the Yellowfin build. All we have to do now is hook the electrical system up, do the hydraulics, get hydraulic fluid in, and just go through the systems and make sure everything's safe for us to take the boat out and use it like it was meant to be used.
When we return, FS boating editor George Labonte joins Dreamboat owner Steve Atman aboard his dive-inspired 29-foot World Cat in this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment. This segment brought to you by Armstrong. Experience the Armstrong Advantage.
Do you have the Armstrong Advantage? In its most basic form, an Armstrong outboard bracket improves the efficiency of your outboard motor. This equates to a faster time to plane and higher top speeds. The list of advantages continue with improved maneuverability, added space, and a quieter ride. Adding a swim platform accompanied by an Armstrong boarding ladder will certainly add to your day out on the water. Isn't it time for you to gain the Armstrong Advantage?
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us for this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment with Florida Sportsman boating editor George Labonte as we feature anglers who have already launched their dream. Florida Sportsman began these features 30 years ago, and the dreams just keep getting better.
Not all One Man's Dreamboats are hull-up restorations or complete renovations, and Steve Atman's 290DC Worldcat is a perfect example of this. Today we met up with Steve and his family in Palm Beach, Florida to see just exactly what makes this Worldcat their dreamboat.
I started diving when I was 18 years old, and so I've been diving 31 years now. About 2.5, 3 years ago, both of my sons decided they wanted to get certified, and when they decided they wanted to get certified, my wife, who had been giving me the Heisman for 20 years, decided that she would do it also. So all three of the rest of my family got certified as well. So at that point, my wife and I decided, hey, let's start looking for a boat that we can make and configure the way we want it for diving. Had heard about cats, had been on a couple of power cats, and liked the ride of them, but wasn't real sure about it. But I didn't discount that as something to check into when we started looking again. And as realistically, when we started looking, I really could not find another boat that would lend itself to diving with as much room as what the dual console boat provides for what we want to do. And as we started looking at the power catamarans, really one of the first things that caught my eye, because we're divers, was the huge swim step and the huge dive ladder that is centered between the motors, because the motors are spread apart on the catamarans. That ladder it's super stable. It's there's plenty of room when you're coming up on the ladder and onto the swim step. And just having that ability to be able to have somebody standing on the swim step to assist divers is definitely a bonus.
Once Steve acquired this boat, he had the perfect platform to start with to build his dream boat. All it required was a few simple modifications to make it more dive friendly.
Once we got the boat, we actually modified it. We pulled the rear seats, the fold down seats out of it, installed the roll control tank rack system on the rear, and that allows us to rack 6 tanks against the transom, 3 on each side. And then at the same time, we pulled the cushion bolsters off the gunnels in the rear cockpit and installed the 4-foot roll control racks there as well. And now I can either run 5 tank holders on either side, which when I do that, I can rack 16 tanks in the boat against the gunnel and the transom, or the way I have it configured right now is run 4 tanks on each side, and then I also run spear gun holders on the back side so we can rack the spear guns and the tanks. Typically we'll dive 4 or 5 people off the boat normally. No more than 6. 6 is comfortable. We have dove 9. We had 9 in the Bahamas 3 weeks ago, and it gets pretty crowded, and you have to do it as multiple dives versus everybody going in, but we could do it and the boat handled it. with no problem. I went to SeaDeck and they actually did a custom length, custom thickness bolster for me to run along the top of both of the roll control racks to give me some cushion bolster against the gunnels when we're out fishing. And I was able to custom select about 7 pieces that I wanted to put on our boat specifically. And I wanted to do our swim step area, the helm step, and then there's a toe kick at the bow of the boat, and I wanted a SeaDeck piece under the anchor chain on the bow. The rest of the decking of the boat, I had already planned to use marine floor mat. It's porous to water. You don't have to put any snaps down to hold it down. It will trailer without moving it. You can roll it up and remove it to clean the decking, but it lets all the water run through it. It's easy to hose off, and it also provides a pretty good cushion for tanks sitting on the deck and gear being moved around, especially in a dive boat where you know stuff's gonna get dropped. I love these new Yamahas. These are the first 4-strokes I've ever had, and they're super quiet. For 300 horsepower motors and twins, they're fuel efficient. I mean, the boat's big and heavy. Dry weight, it's 8,000 pounds, fully rigged to dive, full fuel tanks and gear. I would guess we're probably pushing 11.5. Cruises about 29 to 30 miles an hour at our best fuel burn consumption, and we can get around 1.5. Being on the water has always been my happy place. It's a place that relaxes me. It's the place I enjoy, whether I'm fishing or whether I'm diving. So being able to incorporate that into the name of the boat, you know, put that final stamp of it's ours on there. The flexibility the boat affords us, the family time that it affords us, the ability to bring not just my family, but to have friends and other family is also huge. As far as our passion, which is diving, the boat really has exceeded our expectations in reality.
Now, every time I get on a dual console boat, and especially a catamaran boat, the first thing that comes to my mind is this is the perfect platform for a dive boat. Now, I'm not much of a diver myself, but after spending the day with Steve and his family, I immediately saw how exactly right I was about these boats. This was the perfect boat for this family.
After an initial investment of $242,000 and spending $11,750 on custom modifications, the cost of Steve's Dreamboat comes to a total of $253,750. When we return, the crew at L&H Boats rigs the final components on the 36-foot Billy Knowles project. This segment brought to you by Mercury Marine. Go boldly.
When you're in command of a boat with Mercury 400 horsepower Verados, you might start to feel like you're someone that fish should fear, that the water should respect, and that the world should acknowledge. Until you realize you are all those things. The new Mercury 400 horsepower Verado. Power, control, and speed in a lightweight package.
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as the team at L&H Boats completes rigging and begins sea trials on the 36-foot Billy Knowles project.
We're just finishing up with the Billy Knowles project right now. Pretty much did all the rework on it. We put on the new console with the new electronics display, installed the new Fiat diesel engines in the boat. We just got the trim tabs, the Bennett Auto Trim Pro trim tabs, and we'll be installing them on the boat. We do want to have the flexibility that trim tabs will give the boat, and the Bennett trim tabs are a perfect fit for the boat.
I'm Sean with L&H Boats, presently working on the 36 Billy Knowles. I actually was involved in the original construction of that boat back in '89 when we put it together. We're looking for some transom lift on the boat. The new owner fishes for wahoo at 16 knots, so he wants to be able to plane the boat out at a slower speed and keep it riding flat where he wants it to run. The original trim tab planes were not adequate and they were flexing under load, so we contacted Bennett. They gave us suggestions on what to do, so we modified the trim planes. Trim tab actuators had to be bottom painted for anti-fouling prior to installation because the pockets that are in the boat were narrow to the point to where you couldn't get behind them and get them painted properly. So we pre-anti-fouling painted the actuators before we installed them. The original hydraulic fittings that came with the tabs were not adequate for the hull thickness that we were dealing with, so we had to modify the hydraulic installation. We deleted the brass nipples that come with the actuators, and we went compression direct to the trim tab actuator. Being that it was a wood boat, we had to enlarge the hydraulic line holes because of the way we had to install them with a compression fitting direct to the actuator. So after you open them up, you're exposing raw wood, so we use epoxy to seal up all the wood prior to bedding it with 5200. The way the recessions in the hull were, every bolt had to be a different length because we were restricted with our height in the boat because of the deck beams. So every bolt had to be test fit, cut the length, and refit.
We finished installing the tabs and we're heading to the water. The sea trial on the boat was excellent. This boat back in the day had the Caterpillar 3208s in it. Cruising speed was somewhere in the mid-20s to high 20s. We're cruising now at a little over 30 knots on the boat. Top end's 38, 39 knots. The boat runs really sweet at that speed. It's a really well-handling boat. Has no problems when it gets up into the higher speeds. And then, as well as that, the owner's very particular about how the boat runs, particularly at fishing speeds, which for him, he's a wahoo fisherman, so he's fishing 15, 16, 17 knots. So he wants a boat that has a performance attitude that's similar to its cruising attitude. This is something that we're going to have to rely on the trim tabs to help us with as well. So we've took some measurements at all the different speeds we ran on the boat today, and at the cruising speed of the boat, top end and cruising speed of the boat, we were right where we wanted to be. We're right around 3 degrees of incline in the boat on bow attitude up. So that's worked real well. We're a little off when we get down around 16 knots, which is the fishing speed of this boat, and we're going to throw a bunch of this information at Billy Knowles, the builder of the boat, the propeller people that do the propeller work for us, and see if we can come up with an answer to try to create a boat that has a proper attitude while it's cruising at 30 knots, and then a similar attitude in the water when it's fishing at 16 knots.
Next week on Florida Sportsman, Project Dreamboat. The experts at Two Rivers Boatworks put the 36-foot Yellowfin to the test. The work continues on the 23-foot Seacraft at Wildfire Marine. George Labonte joins Dreamboat owner Jeff Knowles aboard his fully restored classic 20-foot Seacraft. And Two Rivers Boatworks finalizes the custom paint job on the 27-foot Stewart Boatworks.